Welcome to Party Politics. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, a political science professor, also here at the University of Houston. Thanks for hanging out with us and talking politics on Party Politics, which is our last show of the season. Hard to believe. It really flew by.
Absolutely.
But if you want to come see us live and in person, not just on your TV screen or in your audio, you can come see us. We're going to do a recap of the Texas legislative session on May 31st. This is going to be right here on UH's campus in the Hilton Flamingo Room. And the URL is easy to remember.
It's uhpolitics.info. Again, uhpolitics.info.
Take a look at it. It's going to be down below in the show notes. And come join us because we're not going to get to recap the session because we'll obviously go off air before they finish. And who knows, they could have multiple special sessions. But I'm going to save that question for later.
Right,
so we're going to work on that in a little bit. But there's a bunch of news happening this week. And we're going to spend this time talking about things that happened this week. But then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about stuff to watch for over the summer because we won't be here to join you, at least on the show. So we're going to give you some insight in terms of what to watch for. But obviously this week, one big piece of news was that the Republicans in the House have put together a budget package. Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker, has unveiled a $4.5 trillion bill. They call it the Limit, Save, and Grow Act, which sounds like a PBS show. It sounds like a Sesame Street level. But, simple as always good. Basically, what it does is raises the debt ceiling and slashes a bunch of federal spending by multiple billions of dollars, effectively cutting that spending for the upcoming fiscal year and reducing some of the discretionary spending. The Biden administration basically says, no thanks.
Right.
The president called this wacko, which, and I've studied presidents for a long time, and when presidents say something is wacko, it means I'm not going to vote for it. So let the negotiations begin. You tell me what's going to happen here. I mean, the debt ceiling is tremendously important. They have to have this set in place. There are serious concerns from Goldman Sachs, among other agencies in the government, that say that effectively the first half of June, the U.S. could default on its loans, which would be a disaster financially for the country and probably the world.
Not the world.
Yeah. So what's going to happen here?
Well, I mean, obviously the budget is extremely complicated. We have outlays of about $6.3 trillion.
Yeah.
Of those, around $4.1 trillion are mandatory spending. So you only have $1.7 trillion to cut, right?
Yeah.
And also you can cut defense spending, which Republicans are not including into these number of cuts. So it's a non-starter because if you really want to balance the budget, you have to rethink and overhaul how the government operates.
Yeah.
And obviously, you would have to start thinking about all discretionary spending, including defense spending, right? But just to give you an idea, Social Security is $1.2 trillion, Medicaid, $747 billion, Medicaid, $592 billion. Wow. So there is
there'd be no math here, though. So unfortunately, there's a lot of math, it seems like.
There is not a lot of wiggle room, right? It's not like the government can say, well, I'm going to cut my Netflix, Amazon Prime, and things that I don't really need, right?
Yeah. All of the streaming services, you spend more than cable, right?
Oh, 100%, right? And I was making...
Do I need stars still? Well, no, I don't.
Yeah, and then this one, the other one, I need that up. And you don't even know because it's just $7.99 a month. Yeah, but you already have 10 of those, right? So anyways.
Well, no, but you're right. And I think that it creates a political problem for the Republicans because they're going to have to defend these spending cuts. And so, obviously, like I said, Joe Biden, the Biden administration have said, we want a clean bill. We don't want any of these cuts. We just want to kind of proceed on this. That's something, obviously, that the Republicans aren't going to go for, but there's going to have to be some kind of compromise.
But the Democrats, did this last administration with Trump 3 times, right?
Right, yeah.
Clean bill, there you go.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I understand from here is that Democrats will never, ever trust Republicans again. Because I'm sure that Republicans were like, hey, do me a solid and, I'll get you back next time.
No.
And yep.
No, there's no more trust, certainly not in an election year, right?
Yeah.
And so the Republicans are going to have to defend pretty significant cuts. The Democrats came back here and said that all the agencies suggested this is going to lead to a 22% cut in essential programs. You're going to lose access to rental assistance. You're going to have thousands of families who are going to lose these services, millions of meals on wheels. Meals won't be delivered to seniors. So this is something that's going to be tough to defend in an election year.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that's assuming it even passes, which it might not, right? I mean, McCarthy's had trouble getting the Republicans in line, and that's going to be a big issue. So there are issues here in terms of cutting ethanol subsidies. That's one way to save money, right? So yeah, you could cut out Netflix or Hulu because do you need them both? Like, I don't know. But you got to have those ethanol subsidies because the Midwestern Republicans say, we want to have it. The Freedom Caucus continues to push for even bigger cuts. So do you think McCarthy can even get the votes in the Republican caucus? Because the margins are razor thin on this.
Unsure.
Yeah, unknown.
Because as you say, the Freedom Caucus wants I don't want you to cut the Hulu and the Netflix, right? I want everything. We're going to cut even,
cut the cord,
absolutely. Cut we're going to be done with this,
We're just going to be reading books in the dark.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's hard to sell, but obviously that's McCarthy's problem, right?
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, there's some friction, Jeronimo, as you can imagine, sort of mirroring the fight for getting McCarthy to be Speaker. There are several who have kind of internally groused about how this is going to go. McCarthy says privately that he has no confidence in Jody Arrington, who's a Republican from Texas. He mocks him as being unhelpful and doesn't think he can get this job done. He's the budget chair, by the way, an important position when you're, passing a budget. Majority Leader Steve Scalise also has received some scorn from McCarthy in private, saying that effectively that, he's checked out and doesn't really take a meaningful position on anything. Some of this is retribution because of the Speaker fight, and so we're seeing that kind of ugly family politics come out here. I think it's risky for the Speaker to introduce this if he doesn't know the votes are there, and that's where he is right now.
The whip doesn't know how many. I mean, not because he doesn't know how to count.
Yeah.
It's because people are saying yes, no, no, yes. So it's going to be very interesting because he needs to have 218 votes, right? And if he loses 5, which is very likely, nothing is going to happen.
And there's no cavalry here because Mitch McConnell on the other side of the rotunda says he's not going to do anything to help you. He's like, you need to fix this problem and then we can come in. And so even if it does pass the House, it has to go to the Senate, in which case you still have Republicans there who are reluctant to join in such a backing because they also have to run for re-election. As we've said many times, the Senate fight's going to be really the fight for the corner of who's in power in Washington. So there's just lots of uncertainties here. But that's one thing to watch, actually. For the summer, right? Because this will be obviously something that continues. We hope there's no default because the consequences would be grave.
Oh, boy.
And if McCarthy can't deliver these votes, then the question is what's going to happen, right? Can any budget deal happen, period? And that's really the fear, I think, that came up after the Republicans got power and when it was clear that there was going to be this internal fighting. Can they pass anything? And I think we're still unknown on this.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, one thing that is known is that some people were shown the door this week in cable news. When the words of one watcher, this is the craziest day in cable news history. CNN and Fox made major changes. Conservative lightning rod Tucker Carlson is out at Fox, and Don Lemon, who has run afoul of many of his colleagues at CNN, is also out. So can we do those jobs? You want to slide into those roles? What do you think?
Well, I don't think so.
It's a lot of work.
We still need to do our teaching that we love.
Right.
But I think that CNN and Fox, got together for breakfast and said, what do you want to do today?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
How are we going to mix it up, right?
Yeah.
Well, Tucker Carlson has been on the kind of chopping block for a while. Obviously, we talked last week about the Dominion lawsuit. That was something certainly that prompted Fox management to say, you've already kind of, made this a problem for us. But also internally, he had some pretty negative things to say about Fox management. So you don't want to talk badly about your employers because they can fire you, which they did.
Yep. Yeah.
Don Lemon also had internal backlash backlash for on-air comments and behind-the-scenes spat with colleagues. So, we're like angels on set. We're like charming and friendly, and so everything is perfect here. We have no problems, right? I think that obviously the staff, if they have any objections, should say something.
Let us know before.
Well, let's talk about what the sort of, I think everybody knew to be true, but is now officially true, and that is that Joe Biden's running for president.
Right.
What do you make of this? It took him a while to get here. Why?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why he delayed it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's popular amongst Democrats, not all Democrats,
right.
but he's popular amongst Democrats. It's increasing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good sign for him to know that, he's growing into that position.
Yeah.
So that's advantageous. And the other thing is that perhaps they know something that we don't know in terms of what's going to happen in the near future. He has started to tour the country, right? And really saying, the benefits of so far of his administration in terms of building of infrastructure, generating more jobs, so on and so forth. So that's the indication. But obviously, it's going to be a very complicated thing.
Yeah.
If he wins, he will be 86 years of age, finishing his second term.
Yeah, I mean, he's like you and me combined in age, which is definitely one of the reasons why you see the Democrats a little bit reluctant to embrace him. And some of the numbers, as we've said in the past, bear this out. But he has really staked his reelection on Donald Trump.
Right.
He said that effectively that MAGA extremists are chipping away at the bedrock of freedoms. He lists a few people and has in his video a few people shown he doesn't talk about. He says they're cutting Social Security in problematic ways, giving tax cuts to the wealthy, dictating healthcare decisions for women. These are all sellable individually. The question is Joe Biden the right person to bring this message to Democrats? I guess the answer to me is sort of yes. I mean, if you're running a never Trump campaign again, there is unity in that, right? So Donald Trump has done more to unify the Democratic Party than he did to unify the Republican Party.
Correct.
And so that's a good thing for Democrats, but is it enough to convince people after having sort of not seen Trump in a public eye in a very dramatic way, although he's never that far away for 4 years? Is it going to be compelling enough like it was in 2020 to be able to convince people to vote for Joe Biden?
Well, I mean, we don't have the pandemic. The pandemic was, a very, I think, pivotal moment for the Biden campaign back in 2020. And then, we don't know so far if, Trump is going to win,
that's still a question.
The nomination on the one hand. And if he doesn't win, we don't know if he will run as an independent.
Yeah.
And that will create significant problems for both Republicans and Democrats. And it's something that we cannot discount, right? I mean, Trump can just say one day, it's like, I'm done. I'm setting shop by myself, and boom, and have perhaps a Ross Perot 2.0,
interesting,
with more money, perhaps.
Wow, and spoil it for the Republicans, right? I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, but at this point, it looks like he might win the nomination. We'll talk about that in a second as something to watch for sure, but that's definitely in contention. The president's hired a bunch of people. He hired Julie Chavez Rodriguez as the campaign manager. She used to work, she works in the West Wing. She's a longtime Democratic activist. She's also got ties to Vice President Harris. And I think, to me, that's the biggest question. Will younger Democrats and, Democrats who are more ethnically and racially diverse be interested in this candidacy again? Not sure. I mean, enthusiasm is a big question, especially when it comes to turnout, and they need big turnout. They'll probably get it. It's a presidential, and it's going to be an existential fight. But that's still, I think, to be decided, and so we'll still have to kind of watch how that works. But he won't be the only person running for president. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is also running for president. If you've never heard of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it's probably because he's been sort of marginalized politically and certainly kind of excommunicated from the Democratic field. He's an anti-vaxxer. He runs a anti-vaccine charity, Children's Health Defense. They made a bunch of money during the pandemic, but opponents say that he's effectively, invoked this distrust of vaccines, including mothers and Black Americans, who experts say led to deaths during the pandemic. people who've looked at this have said that he's just going to be a kind of chaos agent, right? He's just going to kind of create this difficulty for Joe Biden. And I guess for Marianne Williamson, who's also running, we said weeks
absolutely.
ago. What do you make of this?
Well,
strange.
I mean, it's strange, but I think he's a candidate that also the far right embraces because of his positions in terms of anti-vaccine and the message that he implicitly gives in terms of freedom. And that's something that, people on the MAGA movement, right? The pro-Trump without Trump, perhaps, right? If that exists, really tend to embrace. So I think that he would be an interesting candidate because he's bridging, a gray area that no one has been able to breach. Because on the other hand, he also defends the environment, right? So it's, I read some people were saying, it's where crunchy granola bars meet, freedom, right? So that's
like
correct.
An eagle soars above head as you bite into
so
it.
So it's the hard left and then the far right. Somehow see Robert Kennedy Jr. and hold their hands together. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it's an interesting, I guess, wrench.
Strange.
Just thrown into these big machinery.
It's not the normal kind of, attack of the left or right for a candidate. I don't think Biden will have anything serious to say. And this might, frankly, be the last time we ever talk about him. But obviously, it does suggest that there's some dissent inside the party. And that has to be worked through. And I think it will be. I mean, I do think, like we said, that once you get kind of the flight up, you're going to see everything tighten up and you'll get the, you'll get the kind of support of the party. But let's talk about Texas because there's a lot going on in legislative session. And one of the things that's happening very quickly in the Texas Senate is that they're passing bills left and right. Like it's going out of style here. They passed a bill to limit tenure or remove tenure for new hires at state universities. They passed a bill that would require public schools to display the 10 Commandments. They want to eliminate countywide polling. They want to allow for police to use force and not be held accountable in various ways. They want to have a ban on drag shows. They want election marshals. You get my drift here. Dan Patrick has bragged that he's gone 30 for 30. He had his initiatives and he hit all 30. Now he looks across the rotunda to the House and says, what do you got? Is Dan Patrick going too far here? Is he too far ahead of like the party or of the Texas people?
I think both. Because these things, we have a bicameral legislature, right? So even though that
sorry, I almost spit out my coffee. Like, wow.
So it's, and both chambers have the same power, right?
Right.
So there's two things. One is to exert pressure on the House and say, like, here it is. It's your move now, right?
Yeah.
And the other one, on the other hand, it would be like the House is like saying, well, wait a minute, because you're the Senate, that doesn't mean that you are more important or better than me. So you know what? No.
True.
Like, I'm not going to do anything.
That's true.
And let's see what happens.
But think about this. I mean, the Texas Constitution gives a lot of power to the lieutenant governor. And lieutenant governor is showing us why he's powerful. He's got political leverage in a way that other lieutenant governors don't. And that, like, the House Speaker doesn't. House Speakers have traditionally let the chamber run the show. They keep a light hand when it comes to how to maneuver politically. Dan Patrick doesn't have that problem, right? He can say and do as he wants because, frankly, he needs to as a politician independently elected statewide, but he also has the leverage to do it since he's changed the Texas Senate in his image and stacked it with people who are his allies.
Right.
So, I mean, he's done as much as any lieutenant governor in history to make that happen. But I agree with you that the goal here is to get the House in line, right? That's going to be useful for him because there are a lot of new House members, right? You have something like 150 new House members since Greg Abbott took power and Dan Patrick took power. So that's a lot of influence potentially that Dan Patrick has over those members. But I actually think that the Patrick audience is one person, and that's Governor Greg Abbott. So although Dan Patrick can force a special session, he can't call a special session. Only the governor can do that. So I don't know what the issue will be. I mean, it could possibly be tax cuts where there's a lot of divide between, right? We saw last week Dan Patrick doing the TV shows with like fists of money in his hands, looking like Mattress Mac, right? I'm going to save you money. That plan is in direct contrast to what the House wants to do.
Correct.
There's questions about school vouchers and all the social stuff we talked about, banning drag shows and, teacher tenure, all that stuff. Like these things are all potentially sources of conflict. And so what Dan Patrick needs is to have the governor on his side, because if he wants a special session called, he needs the governor to agree.
And the only thing that I think that Patrick and the governor, Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the governor might be school vouchers and the tax cuts.
Yeah.
Everything else, I think, it's in a gray area because of the potential ramifications, right? And perhaps some of these, social issues regarding drag shows, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's hard to see, right, that, the lieutenant governor can exert significant power, because then, Governor Abbott, I know that perhaps is not, strong politician as Patrick would be, has an ally, right, in the House.
Yeah. He can pick sides. And that's where
I'm sorry to interrupt, my dear friend.
No, indeed.
And, right, Governor Abbott now needs more the House than he needs the Senate, because he needs to advance the vouchers and he needs rural Republicans.
That's a good point,
and to get them on the side. So right now it's, you're pressuring me. Yeah, but I mean, you already gave me what I want.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for these guys that are not giving me what I want, so I have to move on.
Yeah, and I mean, Abbott is nothing if not kind of cautious when it comes to these things politically. I think he wants to kind of wait until he knows what side's going to win, and then he's going to choose the side, which is a pretty politically savvy thing to do. But
absolutely.
Obviously, limits your ability to be able to get what you want, because if you're waiting for them to sort it out, they might not. And then you have to choose at the last minute, and then you're going to make everybody mad.
Special session.
Yeah.
Boom.
I mean, those are some
Boom.
dirty words. I mean, I think a lot of people are like, we don't want this special session. But special sessions are tough. We're going to talk about that too, potentially, because that's something to watch for over the summer, right? Other news this week coming out of Austin was that the Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, sent out a letter to his employees saying that the new dress code requires that the employees dress in a manner consistent with their biological gender. This change comes as there's a lot of bills about LGBTQ rights, and we've talked about several of them here. What do you make of this dress code memo letter?
I mean,
requirement?
It's like these are adults, right? So imposing a dress code is like if you were in elementary school. And I think, it goes beyond, the American, ethos, right? When, and I'm going to go back 1800s.
Wow, we're way back.
Alexis de Tocqueville, right, came here.
Yeah.
He was impressed about, the different views that we have amongst, the American people. 100 years later, Israel Samuel, that wrote The Great Melting Pot, also celebrated, right, those diversities and creating that melting pot. So the moment that you want everyone, right, to adjust or adhere to a very particular point of view that may be Commissioner Miller's point of view, then we lose that, essence, right? That we had as a country when we were founded. And going back to the Declaration of Independence, right?
Wow, we're going way back.
Liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We're going to see powdered wigs all around Austin now. Well, I mean, I'll bring it more up to date, and that is that it potentially violates, Title VII, which bans employment discrimination. That's a potential problem. It also just leads to ambiguity about what women and men can wear. Do you have to wear a suit if you're a man? Can you wear a suit if you're a woman?
Right.
Like, can you wear a necklace if you're a man? Like, all kinds of ambiguities here. I think that Miller just wants like men to wear cowboy hats to match his personal style, and maybe hoop skirts for women. We'll see how that plays out. But before we end, I wanted to get to this question, since we're going to have a little hiatus here, about what to watch for over the summer. So give me one thing you're watching for over the summer.
I think the mayoral race here in Houston is
Yeah.
going to be extremely important and super, super interesting to see, especially the dynamic that we see in terms of Senator Whitmire and Congresswoman Jackson Lee. I think it's going to be very interesting dynamic, and other potential candidates if Bosby decides to run or not, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be one of the most interesting races that we're going to see. What about you?
It's election related too, and it's about Ron DeSantis. Will Ron run? We talked about Donald Trump running for president,
Right.
Marianne Williamson running for president, for goodness sake. Joe Biden has now announced he's running. What about Ron DeSantis? Right, he's the presumed heir apparent to the MAGA crown, but he's been very kind of coy about this, and I think a lot of his donors are getting antsy, and some of them are actually abandoning him, either to be neutral or to back Trump. So I think that's going to be something to watch, because if he waits for too long, he's going to miss that moment.
Absolutely.
And really, presidential elections are all about that moment, right? And so obviously you don't want to peak too early, but if you wait for too long, it's going to make it look like you don't care that much, and that's going to be a real problem for him. So will he run or won't he run? We'll see. Yeah.
Ron. Yeah,
Ron.
That's interesting. Well, I think this is it for this week. And remember, if you want to join us on May 31st here at the UH Hilton, the link is uhpolitics.info, and we would love to see you there.
Yeah, come see us in person. We'll do a big session wrap up. Lots to say. It's going to be a big year. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of change politically in the state, and so we're going to see some interesting ramifications in the legislative outcomes. So come hang out with us. Well, for our season here at Party Politics, thanks for watching. We appreciate all of the input. It's been a great season. Everybody at Houston Public Media has been wonderful putting this together and making us look so good.
Well, and obviously special thanks to, you cannot see them, but there's like 50 people here. Well, no, it's not 50 people, but
they do the work of 50 people.
Right, and we are very, very thankful for everything that they have done to put the show, and obviously the leadership of Houston Public Media, but most of all, the people here on the ground. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to help us. So I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. We'll see you in September.